The existence of time seems to be linked to the necessary curvature of space. This can be noticed when considering the future outcome model of any massive event elaborated by physics. The depth of a star's light cone depends on the addition of time, as it would allow the circular waves of light to superimpose each other as they move away from the source. On the other hand, when we need to describe the geometry of the space around a star, these light waves are the only tool available. As space cannot speak for itself, it cannot be said whether its curvature would be caused by the mass of the star or by the independent action of space itself. In this last hypothesis, it could be generating inertia without depending on the mass of the star. Inertia is opposed to gravity, even though it is considered a fictitious force. In the case of planetary orbits, it would be inertia that would prevent the planets from colliding with the Sun. As it is not possible to measure them directly, the causes of inertia would be placed virtually outside the observable universe. Thus, if we consider that space itself was capable of generating inertia in a veiled way, or without depending on the direct influence of the masses, it would also become a phantom entity. Because we depend on the light emitted by stars and galaxies to assess the geometry of space, we run into the difficulty of the lack of direct access to space and to everything outside space-time. There is no way to directly demonstrate something that cannot be remembered by us. For those who consider that there is no outside of the observable universe, we could say that space, matter and dark energy could be influencing space-time from our future. It's just that the future hasn't arrived yet, so it's not part of our physical reality. We live in anticipation of what awaits us at every moment. Everything we said about the behavior of space would also always be in our future and would remain in the abstract field. Some secondary effects of this performance, however, would explain some inconsistencies. Gravity is similar to time. It is known that it exists, but the mechanisms that would have generated it are not known. It would act like a force, when, in reality, it would be a simple secondary movement of restoration or accommodation to a previous alteration in the geometry of space. Space is often compared to a spring, which, when stretched, would be accompanied by an increase in elastic potential energy. If that energy were to increase outside of here, due to the stretching of space, it would generate a predisposition for the approximation between the galaxies in a second moment. The influence of this potential energy on the galaxies should make them tend to collapse and to coalesce over a single point in space. This need not occur on the physical plane, being an indirect consequence of the complementary contraction of time in the expansionary phase. This temporal contraction would temporarily annul the movement, justifying the fact that we see the expansion of space outside its own time. The placement would go against the point of view of some theoretical physicists who believe that the Big Bang would have resulted from a temporal inversion and the gravitational collapse of a very massive body, forming a black hole. It can say, for a better understanding, that if the Big Bang had a future like cone, as with any other massive event, this cone would tend to flatten during the stretching of space due to the contraction of time. If the cone were compared to the pyramid formed in a house of cards, without time the castle would collapse in on itself. The only energy that could prevent the total collapse of the observable universe would be the elastic potential acting from the outside to the inside of space-time. If it grew unchecked, space-time would implode. If it were to decrease too much, our temporal dimension would tend to expand towards infinity. That would be a disaster for intelligent life. So, the classic question arises. How would space know exactly how to generate inertia in the right measure, aiming to maintain the balance of the space-time system in the post-Big Bang? The answer is not known for sure, and, as is already suspected, we will not find it by looking in the direction of our past. However, one can speculate. If space were able to generate inertia independently of the masses, it becomes evident that the relative and continuous movement, which is observed in space-time, could not depend directly on the mass of bodies. Einstein tried to explain Newton's view of absolute space, even though he disagreed with it. In his book How I See the World, on page 168, he tells us that Newton's acceleration is only thinkable and intelligible as acceleration in relation to the totality of space. To this geometric reality of the concept of space is associated, therefore, a new function of space which determines inertia. Energy and mass are interchangeable, as the famous equation E = mc2 shows us. There is also, to be respected, the principle of conservation of energy. Without the direct participation of the masses in the generation of inertia, we can only rely on the variation in the density of these masses. That is, space would act on masses by varying their density over time, managing the relative movement of galaxies in a universe that, before that, did not count on time. A two-dimensional and static universe at its origin. Time cannot be evaluated separately from light. Without measurable time, light could not move in space. Therefore, light is also used, indirectly, to measure distances in space, as is the case with the position of numerous stars. Every star we see shining at night has what physicists call a future light cone. In turn, the observer could only look at the stars when the light they emit into space escaped this cone. That is, a star would always be seen late, or when its light was already moving inside another cone, called the observer's past light cone. According to Einstein's suggestion, Newton's absolute space would be able to generate inertia independently of masses. In this case, space could influence the density of stars, more or less, managing the relative motion observed with delay in space-time. Thus, this space would alter the depth of the star's future light cone without the stars knowing it, much less the observer. This depth is what would establish, in a veiled way, the time that would have been retained inside the referred cone. That is, when a star could be observed in our past, it would not be possible to know the exact time that its light would have needed to reach us on Earth. This would be related to the uncertainty of the position of the light source. Indirectly, this suggests that our own past light cone would be under the veiled influence of space over time. Here, the possibility arises that the observer could be moved in time without even suspecting it. Time travel would become possible. Our problem with time travel is that we used to think that space would be affected by the movement of time. that thought is justifiable, because we have no way of separating the behavior of space and then of light, which we use to measure its geometry. We were expecting to find futuristic buildings, levitating cars, and the like. Time travel would already be happening, here and now, without any changes in the landscape around us. If our bodies were in the present of the universe, while our memory allowed us to look at this ephemeral lapse of time, always with a delay, the present would be placed in a future point, in relation to our conscious evaluation. So, since we would already be exiled in the past, the only acceptable movement of time would have to be in the direction of our future. That's what science predicts. I often say that the universe is not in the past, we are. If we were moved in time without being aware of it, we could be faced with unexpected situations. We could, individually, see things that others say they haven't seen. As nothing would change physically around us, this type of time travel seems to be related to our need to go through new experiences, individually, and situations that are beyond our control. In some cases, our reactions would have more consequences than our own actions. Basically, space-time could be compared to a stage where we rehearse improbable interpersonal experiences necessary for our individual growth.